meeting of the South Hams Overview and Scrutiny panel. If I could start the meeting by receiving apologies for absence. Stan, we have apologies from Councillor Sweet.
Yes, sorry, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Rose, Councillor Sweet, Councillor Pennington and Councillor Chan.
Thank you. The next item is division of the agenda. Hopefully it will not be necessary to separate the agenda. The purpose of the meeting today is to understand how the waste service got to where it is today and what is to be done to bring about an improvement. The object of this meeting is to arrive at a clear set of agreed actions by FCC and a timetable for those actions to be taken. FCC's performance against those actions can then be considered by the panel at its meeting on the 22nd of July 2021, when the panel's work programme includes a review of the implementation of the new waste service. So this meeting is not about the procurement process, it's not about contractual differences or financial issues, and therefore, as such, it will not be necessary to separate the agenda. The next item is declaration of interest. Members are invited to declare any personal or disclosable pecuniary interests, including the nature and extent of such interests they may have in any items to be considered at this meeting. Are there any members wish to disclose any interest? No. Okay. And the remaining item on the agenda is the Council's Waste and Recycling Service performance. And I'll ask Councillor Baldry, as the executive member responsible, to address the meeting. Thank you. Councillor Baldry.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. Good afternoon, members of the public. Alongside me, I'm going to make a short statement at the moment. Alongside me, I've got Mr. Molyneux and Mrs. Savage. Thank you. You're not waving now. No. Right, and I understand that from FCC, we have Mr. Mark Farnfield and Brian Ashby, is that correct? Who are going to be answering the questions on behalf of FCC. All right. I'm quite good at standing up and shouting. That helps, Chief Executive. No. Is that any better?
That's better.
Right. Right, I'm going to start off by saying that as the executive member portfolio holder with responsibility for waste and cleansing and other matters, I am very concerned about the level of service which we have been giving the public in some parts of the South Hams. And I take responsibility for that because I am the executive member. The rest of the executive do as well. It is not good for the image of South Hams, and it has been going on far too long. But it is our responsibility. The public regard South Hams as the people who collect their refuse, and therefore it is South Hams who are responsible, and I in turn feel that it is my responsibility, and even though later in the meeting I'm sure we're going to be hearing from FCC what has been going wrong, and that members will want to criticise FCC, I'm putting my hands up and saying it is a South Hams responsibility to collect refuse in a satisfactory manner, and we haven't been doing so. I've heard all the explanations and excuses, and we will probably hear some more, and I've heard more than the ones you're going to hear later. Early on, when it started to go wrong, we were slow as South Hams to react. I heard the excuses, oh, people dislike change, and yes they do, and there are a lot of changes. Other people have said to me, it is teething troubles, and yes it was, but we did not, as South Hams, react quickly enough to this. When the round changes came in, there were mistakes made with the round changes. They were devised by our contractor and were not working properly in some parts where vehicles much too large were going down, were scheduled to go down roads where they were not suitable to go. Equally, even though we were told the rounds had been tested, they had not been there were staff changes by the drivers, and we had new drivers on rounds, and they went out after the first initial extension without a pilot to show them where to go. Chairman, I want to pay tribute, if I may, to the hard work of everyone who has been trying to get this improved and make it better, to our staff in the waste team, to members who have taken a great deal of the brunt of the complaints from the public. They have had to work hard as well. And this executive, of which I am a member, we have worked strenuously to get things put right. We have had regular meetings with FCC. We have stressed to them our dissatisfaction with the service. And I want to add two other things, though, if I may, Chairman. I believe that this new service, if it is made to work, is the right thing to do. The aims of the new service are to improve recycling rates. It is not a service which is new to South Hams. We did not invent it. It has now been given by the clever people the fancy title of a super recycling service. The working title is much more applicable, which was Devon Aligned Service. We are not the first people to bring in this new arrangement. It is in operation across most of Devon, apart from Plymouth, across much of the West Country and throughout the whole of Wales. The methods we are using and being introduced are common in a great number of places. Indeed, the way in which we are now collecting the waste or proposing to collect it is what is going to become a government requirement to do it in that manner. It is an enhanced service, I am pleased to say, where we are now going to be collecting bottles, food waste, and a much wider range of plastics. I think it is the right way to go. Where it has worked properly, the recycling rates have improved enormously, and there is far less residual waste going into the black bins, grey bins, black bins, and black sacks. It is something we've got to make to work. It is the right direction to go. I am finally just going to conclude my remarks, Chairman, by saying, yet again, I take the responsibility where it has gone wrong, that we have not reacted quickly enough, and I apologise to the public and to members. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Baldry. Mr Molyneux, would you like to report on the current state of play, please?
Thank you, Chairman. So I'm going to hand over to James Savage to do that in a moment, but just sort of following on from what Councillor Baldry said, my job title is Director of Customer Service Delivery, and I feel at the moment that we've not done any of that with regards to the waste service. We've not provided good customer service, and we've certainly not provided service delivery. And like Councillor Baldry said, the team have been working extremely hard to try and improve things, and the issue is we've been fundamentally let down by FCC. And I can only apologise to members. You shouldn't have been having to deal with the volume of issues from customers, and customers shouldn't have needed to report those issues, because we fundamentally should be providing a good waste service. So I have to hold my hands up and apologise. Like Councillor Baldry said, we've been working very closely to try and resolve this, and I couldn't have asked any more from Councillor Baldry as a lead member, and I couldn't have asked any more from our team, who have been working more than 12-hour days, often 7 days a week, trying to fix this. I know that there are members here that I owe replies to emails to, and the sheer volume of replies that you as members, questions you've been getting from members of the public, and the sheer volume that we've all been getting as officers and Councillor Baldry have been getting, has been, we've not been able to cope with that volume. And as a result of that, we've not been able to deliver the service that we want to deliver to our residents and to you as councillors. So, I firmly hold FCC responsible for that, and I'm sure we will hear from FCC shortly as to why they've had their issues. I'm going to hand over now, if I may, to Jane, who's going to give you a sort of put a graph on the screen which will explain the service in terms of where we're at with the new recycling service. So I realise you can't see that, Chairman. Jane, do you want to take over?
Certainly, thank you. Thank you, members. So the graph is basically to show you where the problems have come from. So I'll let FCC will be going into the details of these, but you can see We introduced this new service in phases. The first 3 phases, phase 1, 2 and 3, are at the bottom of the graph. The graph is showing the number of missed bins, so it's showing the percentages on those rounds that we aren't getting to. The first 3 phases are acting exactly as we would have expected any major change in service to act, where you get an initial rise and eventually it flattens out. Once we got beyond those first 3 phases, so anything after around about the 26th of April, we started on the more difficult to get to properties. So these are the narrow access rounds. So those 3 lines you can see at the top of the graph, they're the ones where we're getting the highest percentage of missed collections. So those are the 3 rounds that are causing us all these problems. And the amount of resource that is being thrown to try and solve that problem is preventing us from going back and rectifying any missed bins that we've done elsewhere. So that is why we've got ourselves into this situation now. It's basically those last 3 introductions of those phases. You'll note, just for interest, that phase 4 is missing from there. Phase 4 was the one we delayed, so that should have come in at the end, I think it was in the mid-April, and we delayed that on purpose because it was a major round. It's about 8,000 households. I think that's probably all I need to say at this time.
Chairman, if I may. So just to give members some context in terms of numbers there, what that means in terms of actual collections and residents. We're currently, with those 6 phases that are on the screen there, trying to collect to round about 36,000 properties on the new recycling service, out of a total of around about 46,000 properties in total. What those graphs show when you equate the numbers from percentages is that basically we're missing around about 1,000 properties a day that FCC are not able to reach as a result of the way the rounds are set up and the vehicles, and that's the problem that we currently face. So of those 36,000 properties that we're trying to deliver this service to, we're collecting pretty successfully to 30,000, but we're still looking at, in effect, 15% where we're missing week after week, or we're missing on a consistent basis. So that's the sort of scale of the problem in actual numbers. On that note, I will not say any more.
Okay, members, when we go into the Q&A session, you'll be able to ask Councillor Baldry and Mr Molyneux and Jane questions. But so I'd like to proceed to invite FCC to, first of all, I wonder if you could introduce yourselves.
Yeah, certainly. Good afternoon, members, officers and members of the public. My name is Mark Barnfield. I'm head of the Municipal Collections and Street Scene business for FCC in the UK.
Good afternoon, I'm Brian Ashby. I am the area manager responsible, amongst others, for West Devon and South Hams contract.
Okay. Mr Barnfield and Mr Ashby, rather than you provide a statement, we will proceed by way of a question and answers. So first of all, I will invite questions from members on the current state of affairs. Once those questions have been dealt with, I will then invite you to put forward your proposals for addressing the current state of affairs and restoring the waste collection service that you are contracted to provide. So we'll start with questions from members on the current state of affairs. I'd like to start the questions with the following. We as members are being inundated with complaints from those we represent and they're complaining about the continuous missed waste collections and an unsatisfactory recycling service. As you heard, there are between 4,000 and 5,000 missed collections, and as a result of this unsatisfactory state of affairs, some residents are starting to abandon recycling. It's a simple question: what has gone wrong?
Sorry, thank you, Councillor Birch. Sorry, apologies. Thank you, Councillor Birch, for allowing us to put some context around this. And I think the first thing we would like to say is we acknowledge that the level of service that your residents are receiving, or some of your residents are not receiving, should I say, at the moment is not acceptable from our perspective. Clearly not acceptable from the residents' perspective, and from the perspective of yourselves as members, it's not acceptable that you're getting the number of complaints you are getting for the Devon Line service, the new recycling service, in terms of the level of incompletes and missed bins on a weekly basis. What I think I'd like to do is explain how this has built up to this point, and what the root causes of this problem is that's causing the level of dissatisfaction that we're acutely aware of. I think what is essential for us as an organisation, as your contractor delivering essential services to your residents, is that the outcome from this is that we ensure that all properties in South Hams are getting their recycling collection or their waste collection on their scheduled collection day on the frequency that's detailed. That needs to be where we get to. That's where we will get to moving forward. Just for some context, and I think the graph that was put up earlier, it showed with the new Devon Line service, and I remember speaking to the overview and scrutiny panel in January, I believe, with regards to the round change issues and the learning from the business there. The recommendation, and it is the right approach, was to do a phased introduction of the new recycling service to the residents of South Hams. The graph presented demonstrated that the early phases were working to expectations, and I think the point worth making with any service change in terms of a collection system, whether that's frequency or collection type, there is always a little bit of initial disruption, and it beds in and it refines, and it was certainly moving in that direction on the early phases. The latter phases, as you have seen, have caused the level of misses to go up. Now, once this started happening and the data became clear that the performance and the incompletes of the rounds on a daily basis wasn't completing to our satisfaction or anywhere near, through conversations with your executive, and there was a plan put in place in order to rectify that situation. So we're talking around sort of 18th, 19th of May. And just to put into context how serious we took it then, we take it now, and we continue to take it until we get this resolved. We put in significant more resource to support the service to get it to a manageable level. The rounds that we had out, particularly the latter rounds that have caused us the problems, are the more restrictive rounds within the district. And so we put in an additional 4 what we call 7.5-ton curbside vehicles, with the easier access curbside recycling vehicles to support the rounds that weren't completing. Additionally, we brought in more supervision with support from yourselves and from other parts of our business in other parts of the UK. That included other waste and recycling contracts and support from our fleet team. On top of that, we focused on where you were getting some of the repeat misses. We put some additional dedicated restricted rounds in play. The transfer station, for those of you that are aware, where we take the recycling material back to, is at the Ivy Bridge depot. We also put additional resource in there to manage the flow of traffic of vehicles out and back, and the tipping arrangements. And in order that we could monitor and hopefully see a tangible improvement in the performance, we got additional data management support from other parts of the business in order to try and deal with the situation. And that's, as I say, that was mid-May. So a lot of that additional resource was put in. I think it was week commencing the 20th, whatever it is, of May. So what we should have seen in the sort of 2 to 3 weeks after that, bearing in mind where you saw the performance on the graphs, was a materially improved position, where the number of misses and incompletes was drastically down, to a point at which we would have the ability then to focus on, repetitive problems that I know you as members are receiving countless emails from your residents. The results, whilst some improvement, were marginal, I think it's fair to say, and not good enough in terms of improvement in performance on the back of the resource that we've put in place. So it has forced us quite rightly to look at, well, okay, typically elsewhere where you have incomplete rounds or high levels of misses, additional resource to collect typically makes sense to bring that down. We weren't seeing the results that should have come about there. What is apparent to us and has been apparent since we've rolled this service out, the additional resource that we have put out and is out in the system, just to give you some context, we currently have 21 rounds out there doing the curbside service for the residents that we've rolled out to so far. Plus an additional, and we'll come on to the volumes in a minute, additional 6 vans on some of the smaller rounds, essentially to take cardboard, which is a massive volume increase in order to support some of those rounds out there. So we've got, essentially, for the service we've rolled out, we've got nearly twice the resource that the service was originally designed for. That causes a couple of issues. We have a transfer station where all the vehicles go back and tip, so increased congestion at the waste transfer station is something that was clearly visible to us, and we'll come on to why that was causing a problem. The other, I think that the point to make there is the service designed for half the number of vehicles. If you double the number of vehicles, the unproductive time of tipping and the wait time when vehicles come back increases. So if you think some of the parts of the district, the crews have to come back, and if they've then got to wait, these are multi-compartment vehicles, so it's not commingled. The time to tip is typically around 25 minutes, and if you're waiting, that's not effective or efficient if you want the guys back out in a productive collection way. The other area of analysis that we have done to understand the problem is look at a complete data set of the amount of material that we are collecting. The material that's segregated and goes off to the various recycling reprocessors, we get tonnage data back, would have been typically on a monthly basis. We've rolled out and we've got a full month of May's tonnage data. We got back that early this week, and we've identified that the volumes that we're collecting, which we would have experienced across the business during and post-COVID anyway, because of the nature of working and consumer habits, but the material volumes on plastics and cans, not plastics and card individually, and glass are significantly higher than 2018 volumes and design levels for reasons that I'm sure you would understand. The impact that has had has also had an impact on the bulk loads out, so that once the transfer station at Ivorybridge, the materials are bulked up and collated, then you get a bulk vehicle taking them to the reprocessors. Obviously that's load efficiency, but the frequency of bulk loads has increased as well. So essentially, in cutting to the chase, the congestion at the transfer station has created quite a bottleneck. The other point to make around with this type of system as well, where you have significant tonnage and volume increases, the sensitivities of this collection system, and I support Councillor Baldry's point around this being almost a future-proof collection system that meets all the aspirations of the incoming resources and waste strategy. But from a collection perspective, the sensitivities are, as soon as one compartment fills, you might be 50 or 30% full on the other, but one compartment fills, you have to go to tip, which, in itself is just the nature of the system. What we have found, because of that volume increase as well, on the smaller vehicles, so the rounds that have come later, the material that has bulked out or filled the compartment quickest has been cardboard, forcing the number of tips to increase significantly above design levels. And it's difficult when you just look at tonnage because there is a volume issue, because some of the different materials have, so not getting too bogged down in that, but essentially what we and why we are where we are in terms of the level of performance not being anywhere near an acceptable level is the increased volumes plus significantly increased volumes of material and the significantly increased tipping requirements over double that of design levels has created a huge bottleneck at the depot and waste transfer station, which is unsustainable to carry on with that approach. So in terms of the context of why we are where we are, to answer your question, Councillor Birch, and the question from the members, that's essentially why we've got to the position we're in.
I don't think you really answer the question, what went wrong, what has gone wrong? Because I must remind you that you came before the ONS panel towards the end of last year, and you've been in contract for quite a while by then. If these circumstances that you described were in existence then, you did not point out to the panel that you anticipated these problems then. I mean, the fact of the matter is, the circumstances that are before us now were before us in November. Why did you flag up to the panel when you came towards the end of last year that you anticipated problems and how you were going to address those problems?
Sorry, apologies. Fair question. The point around the previous overview and scrutiny panel and the recommendation for the phasing was the right approach. But I think what it's fair to say is with a new collection system, a new recycling collection system, and bearing in mind we were also back into second lockdown or whatever with the COVID pandemic, the actual data to support the amount of material increase was an unknown, still is an unknown, and not an unknown, it's becoming stark now with the data we received in May. But forecasting at the point of the service design, that increase was, who knew the pandemic was coming, and that's not the entire reason. A new system will attract more material. We had designed in also additional vehicles above the position to counter that point for this rollout. But the point we're making, I think, is that has gone way beyond those sort of levels, which you wouldn't have known in November from a statistical point of view, because you are now segregating the materials. Whilst when you had your SAC system, that segregation and composition wouldn't have been known at that time in these circumstances.
Okay. One of the issues that you mentioned was the Ivy Bridge station.
Yeah.
It's correct to say that your company designed the Ivy Bridge depot?
The FCC designed that in 2018 based on tonnages at the time, yes.
So did they get the design wrong?
The design, I would argue, based on the data at the time, was right.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm interested, the slide that went up earlier it showed that the two streams that you're having the most problem with are currently the narrow collection vehicles. Well, I think I can tell you why that is, because you haven't got a clue where you've delivered the boxes. You've delivered the boxes out, and the guys that are supposed to go around and pick it up haven't got a clue where they've got to go. I can tell you that because that's what's happening in my ward. I spent all of yesterday afternoon in Holme and Scrutiny, tracking around myself, going around properties, and the only way that I could work out where the round was supposed to go was all the stuff that's out ready to collect. Your guys have delivered the bins, and your collectors haven't got the slightest idea where they're supposed to go. We're constantly emailing in postcode after postcode after postcode, and your guys will do an emergency collection, but they still can't string the rounds together, and that's a shambles. So, and the other thing I was going to say a lot, but, well, I am going to say a lot, but I'll let some other people have a go in a minute. You know, I don't know a huge amount about FCC, so I thought I'd look on your website. And on your website it says, you know, FCC own and operate more than 200 recycling, treatment and disposal facilities across the UK, with 100 contracts across 60 local authorities. So you've obviously got a decent track record. So the plea on behalf of all members is, why can't you get ours right? And it gets even better. And Councillor, knowing how Councillor Brazil loves a bit of irony, there's a bit coming up. You've got a headline there under efficient routes. Every one of our waste collection trucks takes the most efficient route when they're out and about. No, they don't. They ain't got a clue where they're going. Why can't you make ours do that? Why can't you make ours efficient? And it also says, hassle-free collection. More than 60 local authorities currently use our hassle-free household waste collection. And on my knees, on behalf of members, can I ask, please, can we have a hassle-free collection? As I say, it's not just me, it's the whole council, it's all members. We just want it to work properly. Well, there were three. Why can't you get it right? Why can't you make our vehicles go the most efficient routes? And why can't we have a hassle-free service?
I will open up and I'll allow Brian to fill in. Look, we want you to have a hassle-free service, and that's where we're going to. We have and I'm sure we'll come on to it, what next, and we will get to that place. We agree, not acceptable at the minute, and that's where we want to get to. The point around, and it does form part of the action plan, in terms of the pressures that are causing the performance right now that we're discussing, that's not caused by the routes. However, we do accept that there's elements of that routing that we will need to look at moving forward. So we note that we see sometimes, which is often the case with routes, that they don't always. They need refining, to put it in that sort of context. And I think, I don't know, Brian, whether you wanted to say anything on the boxes and the rounds in terms of, you probably don't, but...
Yeah, no, just a couple of points that you made there. The equipment that our crews have should make the rounds more efficient. The problem that we have is you have to do the round properly a few times for that software to be effective. The problem that we're getting is, as you said it, you know, a lot of our vehicles we're experiencing problems with them getting to where they need to go, and the rather hodgepodge way that the guys are doing it because they don't know where they're going because the software can't help them. That comes with getting the rounds right. The other thing about that is of course we have about 60 odd new staff. So these are people that we've tried to train, but you know that only, a lot of that will only come with experience. So a lot of the new rounds, you know, when you consider the difference, you know, we were doing this on 6 rounds. We've now got 21. That's 15 extra drivers, many of whom have never driven this type of vehicle before. Many of whom have never driven collections vehicles before. You know, sort of anecdotally, you know, they spend half of their time in reverse, which is not what what normal drivers are used to. I appreciate all of these, you know, I go back to my wife, these are reasons, not excuses, but, and they're all things that we are trying to resolve. It is just the quantum, to use one of Mark's phrase, you know, is the problem. It's getting the people out there to do it, and where we have had people out there assisting with the crews, we have seen a very, very some very quick gains.
If I could, sorry, very quickly, Chairman. The other thing to realise is that you've got you totally untapped resource here, in that you've got members who nobody knows their area better than the members who are sat in this room. I mean, speaking from my own personal experience, I would quite happily go out and show the blessed crews where to go, and I'm sure there's probably other members who would quite happily do that, because you meet them driving around the lanes, and they're obviously, they haven't got an idea. So the plea that, we're all elected members, and part of the reason that we got elected is that we know our areas probably better than anybody else. And there's a resource around, and you're not using it. So, I would suggest that you do.
Right, questions from members of the panel. Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you. And if you can hear me. Well, this is a public meeting, obviously. We've got a public meeting at long last. I think it should have been earlier. We had a chance at the full council meeting under urgent business, and we weren't allowed to, and I don't think that goes down well with the public. We had a chance at executive level, it was missed. We're here, and we're discussing it, and the public would be pleased about that, but I think they won't be pleased with what they've heard so far. It is a litany of excuses. We've heard that 15% are being missed week after week of collections. We're several months down the line with this now, several months after the round changes were introduced. We're hearing things about consumer habits that are blamed. Residents will feel that they're being blamed for the problems they've been having with a very basic public service that they should expect to have hassle-free for their council tax. A lot of them are demanding council tax rebates. I don't blame them. Some are going to the Ombudsman. I don't blame them. They're not happy. They can't even get through to the council. We are here with FCC, but they can't seem to get through to the council to find out what's going on, so they go to councillors, which is fine, it's what we're meant to do, but they can't get through to the council. Presumably it's all in meltdown because there's so many other people trying to get through. We're also told about congestion at the transfer station, but then we're told who designed a depot. FCC designed a depot. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up.
Councillor Callaghan,
I'm leading into a question,
yes.
as others have. And I've been spending huge amounts of time dealing with this, problems week after week, month after month, actually some since the round changes started last autumn. I've had a 91-year-old lady in Kingsbridge writing to the paper. She's been given an assisted collection by the council. FCC doesn't seem to have got the message. She hasn't got her assisted collection. The elderly and the vulnerable in our society are the ones, I would say, who are most hit by this. They live in Kingsbridge in narrow passageways off 4th Street. Week after week, their assisted collection is not happening. It's an absolute disgrace. And I apologise yet again on behalf of FCC, who have not apologised despite saying to the last ONS panel they would apologise, and they haven't. And they won't even speak to councillors. We're not allowed to speak to FCC, so they're sitting there nodding. They won't speak to councillors, it's not in the contract, but we're not allowed to mention the word contract, so I won't. Now, I will ask again, in another way, how has this happened? You appear to have completely underestimated the number of vehicles that are needed, the size of vehicles, huge vehicles trying to get down narrow lanes. It would have been obvious to anyone not in a specialised business, it would have been obvious to a 5-year-old that that was not the way to run a waste business. Why wasn't this properly mapped out in this district of narrow lanes and byways? Why wasn't it properly set up? Everyone else is running around doing your work for you. Why were no lessons, for example, learned from what similarly seemed to have happened in Allerdale Borough in West Cumbria, where I was reading articles about large vehicles rumbling down their narrow lanes in 2019, before you started here? It's the same company as FCC. Why didn't you learn lessons from that? Week after week, apparently residents there were missing their collections. Eventually, this is another council, they brought their service back in-house. That's their prerogative. But why didn't FCC learn from this sort of experience? I know you've said mostly things have gone well elsewhere, but, that can't possibly be the case. As I say, my question is, why do you not learn lessons? Why were you completely under-resourced, unprepared? Your software was all wrong. I mean, everything was wrong.
Thank
Was
you,
there anything that
Councillor
was
Callahan.
right? Might be the
Okay,
question.
I'll ask
That's the
Mr.
question.
Barnfield to answer that the questions. There's several questions there, so could
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Callahan. To go back on, and I think just to go back where I started at the beginning of this, that we acknowledge and we are sorry to those residents that haven't had the service that they deserve, and we are doing everything we can to put that right. You point around, why do we not? So that we do apologise for that. What we are trying to do is, we have learnt and we have between us operated many successful collections contracts. Collections contracts do experience stresses on occasion, and where we have that experience, that brings to bear. And as discussed, with regards to putting this right, resource to do that is not anything. We will put resource in if it's required to rectify the problem, which is what we tried to do. And in the instance coming May, it didn't bear the results that we needed to see. The level of performance isn't an acceptable level, and we take your point around all residents and those that are on assisted collections. When I came before to explain some of the issues that in terms of lessons learned on the round changes and recommending the phasing, which is the right approach for this collection service, we did acknowledge there were things that as a business we could have should have done better in that instance, and there are a range of issues there, and it's not to go over those again. I think, why are we here now? Why the situation in South Hams at the minute in terms of tonnage and volumes is stark. The design based on 2018 tonnages versus now, vastly different. It's a tonnage and volume issue that has caused that bottleneck and pressure. We know that, we understand that, and we can now do something about that, and we'll come on to that. So we do take lessons from our previous experiences in this sector, and we do have plenty of experience.
Thank you. I just want to ask some questions about, the nitty-gritty of how things went wrong. In my view, many of the problems seem to stem from what appears to be a completely inadequate round review at the beginning of this process, and should have formed, I would have thought, the foundation to the round changes and the subsequent rollout of the recycling system. So, does FCC accept that it did not carry out this task in a thorough and professional way? Is a simple question. I've got another couple of questions in this group of questions. So I've got a few here, but I'm not going to dominate the meeting for too long. But I would like to get through these. So that's one question, and in a similar vein, the design of the rounds seems to be confusing, with very similar interconnected roads split into different rounds. I can't fathom it. And how exactly were these rounds designed? I'm sure FCC is aware that there exists established statistical methods for finding the optimal solutions to problems like this. The vehicle routing problem is a well-known mathematical problem. It's been studied for well over 50 years, and there is software out there. Were these methods used, and if not, why not? And with regard to the rollout of the recycling system specifically, why were the wrong vehicles assigned to the rounds? The widths of road data is available. Devon Highways have this. Ordnance Survey have a commercial product whereby you can get this. And also, why was this not collected as part of the round review? It's fundamental stuff. How on earth did you manage to get it wrong, so badly wrong? All of the problems in my ward are nothing to do with volumes. They're to do with the wrong vehicles being sent to the wrong place. So, collecting information about pinch points, accessibility, overhangs, all the stuff that is the fundamental to delivering a service like this. Why was this not done? To me, a large amount of this could have been a desktop exercise, but did a suitably qualified FCC manager drive each of these rounds to check them and record any issues prior to the round changes? And also, subsequently, when problems first started to emerge. That's my first tranche of questions. If you could address those, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Light on, I will learn that by the end of the meeting. Thank you, Councillor McKay. In terms of a number of questions there with regards to the round design, I think, as acknowledged, moving forward to rectify some of the problems that you refer to in that design, we will look at that again to make sure that the long-term service for South Hams it's in our interest to make sure that they work correctly. You know, with round changes, there are always issues, no matter where you do it, and your point around was it done properly in terms of using routing software? Yes, it was. In terms of some of the feedback I think I gave at the overview and scrutiny earlier this year, there was an acknowledgement that some of the, in terms of the business from a capturing local knowledge perspective in terms of the rounds, and there were various IT related issues as well in terms of data and routing software that could have been managed better, and we'll certainly take that forward. So I think, to acknowledge your point, was it done in a professional way? Yes. By somebody suitably qualified to do it? Yes. Did it produce the perfect outcome? I think we accept that, and we see that with some of the emails we get in terms of the, you refer to certain villages being split or whatever, we acknowledge that, and we are noting and looking to deal with that moving forward. Just one of your points, you mentioned that it's nothing to do with volumes in your ward. I think that the point around volumes and tonnages is the cumulative impact across the district on the vehicles and the transfer station. So whilst I understand what you're saying, that it's the cumulative impact of that's causing that issue. Brian, I'm not sure if there's anything you wanted to add in terms of what I've said there.
Okay, I mean, you've answered the questions as best you can, I guess, but can I go on to something entirely different, which is the communications between South Hams District Council and FCC. I mean, it seems to me that there was a complete breakdown of communications. I mean, I've constantly heard from officers that they've tried to relay problems to FCC, and it was just like sending emails into a black hole. I know ultimately we embedded officers with FCC in order to try and solve these problems, but clearly that's not the long-term solution. And what exactly was going wrong there? Why did we end up in a situation where we simply couldn't communicate with you any longer, or at least the officers couldn't? Which is why members never ever got replies. That's what came down the line. Is the reason we aren't getting replies is that officers aren't getting replies from FCC. Why was that the case?
Okay, yeah. Thanks again, Councillor McKay. The point I'd make around that is, and we accept that in terms of referring to the graphs and the level of performance now and some of the issues experienced in managing these changes, the scale of the misses is not an acceptable level, which creates an awful lot of complaints for you guys, an awful lot of misbin reporting through your system. So I think the point that probably needs to be made to answer that, I think you guys have been overwhelmed. I think it's fair to say your officers have been overwhelmed, and in terms of trying to deliver the service, rectify the service and respond to that as a business because of that scale, we've been overwhelmed as well. I think so in terms of the responsiveness and the communications point that you make, I think it's fair to acknowledge that. The reality is we, working with you, your officers need to agree a way forward, and we have a way forward to get that right down, so we can focus on the individual bespoke issues that a typical contract of this nature would have the time and space to do. But I think it's fair to say that it's not for the want of trying to deal with all of this, but picking through that scale has probably caused that, I guess, flow of communications to be difficult.
Thank you, Chair. This will come as no surprise to FCC and to members from ONS that I still maintain that a lack of supervision and a lack of management on the contract early enough is part of that problem. I acknowledge and agree with Mark that everybody's been overwhelmed by the volumes, and absolutely that has fundamentally played a part in that. But ultimately, that comes down to the resource available to not only manage the trucks and the day-to-day operation, but deal with the volume of complaints and issues that we've been getting. And there certainly hasn't been that capacity from FCC, which is why we tried to put extra officers in to support it. But I had the conversation with the Chief Executive last Friday, which was I could put 15 people in and it still wouldn't make any difference, because unless FCC had 15 people at the other end, we still wouldn't get any answers. So it needs to be a fundamental fix of the problem, is the only way we're going to resolve this. Thank you.
Councillor Mackay, I know you may have some further questions. I'll come back to you. So if I'd like to... Councillor Austin, I believe you have a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We have a meeting here in 7 days' time that is a meeting of the full council. And at the moment, the only agenda item we have on that meeting is to discuss exactly what we are discussing now. Now, my questions are for the chairman of this committee, which is, you have called a meeting of the extraordinary meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee here today. Why did you do that when we're having a full council meeting in a week's time? So all of the councillors will be here in 7 days' time discussing nothing but this issue. And as chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, you have decided to hold this meeting today to discuss what we are only going to discuss again in seven days' time. So my first question is, why would you do that? My second question is, we have no recommendations before this committee. So you've called an extraordinary meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We've been in this meeting now for an hour. I see no recommendations coming before the committee. There is none on the agenda. There is no recommendation for us to consider. So do you have a recommendation for us to consider? And why are we here?
Councillor Austin, I'll answer your question later in the meeting. I have Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, one of the questions that Councillor Mackay asked, I was going to ask again. I was just wondering if Mark and Brian had actually done the rounds in the vehicles, because I know as a manager, if I was having that many problems, I'd jump in the lorries and see what was happening for myself on the ground. And the other thing is, I was taken before the rollout in Kingsbridge. I went with a fellow town councillor with an officer, because it's quite idiosyncratic, as in many small towns in Devon, lots of little alleyways, and it was all very vague, but there was lots of talk of like doing road shows in local towns, and I haven't heard anything more about that, because people are really keen to recycle down here, and I think they feel really disappointed that it's been, such a shambles, really. So have you done the rounds yourself?
Councillor Jackson, thank you for the question. And I can answer for myself personally. I haven't personally. But in terms of, and I'll let Brian has certainly more local feel than myself in terms of some of those issues. I mean, I've been down here many times in recent weeks, as I'm sure you'd appreciate, but personally, no. But what I would say with that is, equally, I'm not an HGV or an LGV driver, which in order to assess that type of access, you would need to be a professional driver in that sense. In terms of getting to the point of more local community engagement with road shows, I would love to be here talking to you about that, and we will get there with that. Unfortunately, obviously, we need to deal with the the service issues that we have at the moment. And I look forward to being able to do that, if I'm honest. Brian, I don't know whether you wanted to add more about the round issue.
Very much the same as Mark. I do have an LGV licence, but I haven't driven one of the Roam equipped vehicles that we've got here. We have brought in people from other contracts. We did have one of the supervisors from West Devon who was driving the rounds before we introduced them. I think what has exacerbated the problem is, as Councillor Smurden said earlier, is that the way that the operatives are doing it, they're not necessarily approaching some of these junctions and areas in the same way as they would have been when we were driving them. And also, we do have the problem that, as I've said before, is the experience of the drivers that we've got. They are very often very nervous. And until we can actually get somebody out there, which we have been doing, and we have been resolving some of these issues, they are very nervous about making some of these manoeuvres in the vehicles that we've got. And again, that can only come with experience. But as I say, where we have it an obvious where we think a vehicle should get down, we've got somebody out there and resolved it. Unfortunately, that is it's a resource that is not infinite. So we can only cross these things off as we come across them.
Sorry, Councillor, could I just add one further supplementary there? In terms of the support that we have put in as part of the initial action plan back in May, we have a fleet team that support the business nationally. So we've deployed all the fleet inspectors who are experienced fleet professionals, have been out with the crews, particularly in the difficult access areas, to support and try and resolve and help them negotiate with their vehicles what they should be doing. So we accept your point, but we have deployed specialists in that particular field to address it.
It's on the other point. Very briefly to remind members that, of course, South Hams did plan to do road shows using our locality officers and members of the waste team. There was a full programme arranged, but we had to put it because of the pandemic.
Councillor Jackson, did you have just one further question?
Yeah, I was going to say I wasn't suggesting that you drive the vehicles. Actually, I was just saying, and actually practicing and doing the rounds would have maybe been quite enlightening. I don't always rely on data myself at work. Sometimes I find being in place is better. Thanks.
I totally agree with that, and I would just like to point out that I did last week, the week before, there were some areas I was going to have a look at. I wasn't driving the rounds, but there were some very specific areas that I went to have a look at. And quite frankly, it might be an age thing. I had trouble getting my car there, but I do know that we can pick that up in a 7.5-ton vehicle. So yes, I do know, as you put it, the idiosyncrasies of Devon villages. But yes, I know that some of them are particularly difficult to get access to, and but I am leaving that to our fleet professionals to try and resolve those issues.
Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Chair. I listened to what FCC have said, and I think FCC are forgetting one thing. This is not about FCC. This is about the residents who expect a service and pay for it, and currently, arguably, don't get it. So I'd like to ask our two colleagues to put themselves into the life of a resident, if you aren't already a South Hams resident, and having to deal with this, and you get your own bin missed, and you report it on the FCC website, and you get an acknowledgement said, yeah, okay, we know about it. And then lo and behold, next week, your waste isn't collected again. So you report it, and you get the same bland statement that says, okay, we know about it. And now you've got 2 weeks outstanding. And the third week, it happens again. And the fourth week, it happens again. And the fifth week, and more, it happens. So as residents, you've reported it dutifully in the way that you've been asked to do it, and your contractor is ignoring what you are telling them. So can you tell me then how you would feel as a resident, and also what you would suggest the ward councillors, who are mostly on the receiving end of this, should tell residents and how they should explain the situation. And I think that's it. Your explanation has been made much more difficult today because you said that you've designed a transfer station that can't cope. People are recycling more, but you can't cope. As Peter said, you're one of the biggest companies. You're an international company. You've got huge amounts of experience, which residents don't have. But residents are giving you clear guidelines. Residents are trying to help you, but you're not helping them. So I just wonder how you can make all these mistakes, design a transfer station and build it in 2020 or 2021 to 2018 spec, and none of your other divisions, none of your other 60 councils are having anything like the experience we're having. So perhaps my final question is, why are you picking on South Hams? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. And I can assure you we are not picking on South Hams. We accept the level of service to your residents, or some of your residents, because not forgetting some residents are getting a decent service, but those residents that aren't, it's not acceptable. How would I feel? I would not be happy if it was and I think that's natural and honest. So look, we know the issues exist. We know why the issues and the pressure on the system has got us to the place we are, and we do have a recommended plan to move this forward. But I can assure you we are not. I don't think you would expect us to be doing this. We don't want to be in this position either, with the service in the state that it's in.
Could I, Chair, just follow? I believe that you gave a plan of action to the executive at some point in the past. And can you tell us why we should feel that this new plan of action is actually going to have any greater effect than the old plan of action, which clearly hasn't?
Yes, we did, and those points I made, I think, in one of my earlier explanations with regards to the additional resource and vehicles and supervision and so on and so forth that we put in place, which would naturally have that benefit, it's more detailed than that, were the core elements of that, wasn't having the impact that we would expect the residents deserve and as members you deserve. So moving forward, I think all I can say is about that is that the way forward will get us to a position that will work and was working. It has to, and we are extremely confident that it will. But clearly we need to work with your officers to ensure that your officers and you as members have the same confidence in us to be able to do that when we come to it.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Barfield, a really simple question on the back of the fact that the recycling system is great in its principle, but we are losing a not insignificant proportion of the public on this. People are putting food waste in black bins because they can't guarantee that they're going to have it collected. So my question to you is a really straightforward one. What do I and my 30 colleagues say to members of the public at the moment? Not what's happened in the past, not what's happening in the future, but what's actually happening today. If I were to show you the 10 emails on my system now, what do I tell those people? That's all I want to know. What do I tell them?
I think there's an acknowledgement that for some residents it's not working as it should. We are, and we have been, picking up those individual issues as we've gone. The magnitude and a number of those has been a challenge. The pressures on the system that have caused that, and we do have a way forward. In the meantime, I think whilst we are truly sorry for those residents that are experiencing a poor service, and we have stated that publicly, it's a case of bearing with us and we will get there. But I think the channeling of information through the reporting system and certainly through members We are, I think, picking some of those up and starting to deal with those, but the point around the misses and the incompletes at the minute, that the system is at a point of an unacceptable level of performance, and it's, as your contractor, it is our responsibility to get that down, and we will.
Are there any other members of the panel? Councillor Austin.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think you failed to answer a very simple question that I just put to you a minute ago, which is, given that we have a full council meeting in 7 days' time, and the only reason we're having that full council meeting is to discuss this very issue, why would you, as chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, call an extraordinary meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee 7 days prior to that event? Now, I think it's rather ironic that you're sitting here constantly asking the contractors to come up with answers to questions, but when I put that question to you, you completely and utterly failed to even address it or answer it at all. So can you please give me an answer to that simple question: why did you hold this meeting 1 hour into it?
As I said earlier, I'll answer that question shortly. I'll answer that question shortly after we finish.
After an hour, we don't know.
Councillor Austin, please would you desist? I will answer your question shortly. Right, are there any other members of the panel who've got a question? Councillor O'Callaghan, can you make it a question, please?
Yes, I'm afraid I think Councillor Austin's being extremely disrespectful to the members of the public who are listening into this, wanting information about why their rubbish is not collected, and all he's interested in is a point about why this meeting's been held in the first place. I think he's missing the whole point. This is a public meeting. It's on behalf of the public. It's for about a public basic service, and I think he should look at himself. And
No,
he doesn't come out of this well. My question is, well, I mean, we're being told again, bear with us. I mean, it's too late for that. It's the public. It won't wash with the public. I was going to say, when can we expect things to be back to normal? But to be honest, I just don't expect that I can't see that they're going to be. My specific question is going back to assisted collection, which is for vulnerable people, elderly people. In many cases that I've dealt with, they're showing up on the council system online as having assisted collection. It is not translating, in my experience, I don't know about other members, as them having assisted collection week after week. These frail elderly people often, that's why they've got assisted collection. This should be seen as an urgent priority. They are not getting their boxes and sacks, caddies collected. And then they don't know why they're not collected. They then, some of them, put them at the end of the street, which is the whole point. They don't want to do that because their health and safety is at risk. So they put them at the end of the street thinking maybe they'll pick them up because they've missed that they're assisted. They don't get collected there either, so they bring them back again. I mean, it would be funny if it weren't so appalling. Not to mention, we've now got better weather and we've got rats and maggots being, reported as well. But the assisted collection thing is one that particularly distresses me, and it's not about me, Councillor Austin, it's about the residents. It distresses people, and I'm concerned. I wouldn't be surprised if someone has already fallen over a box, who's in their 80s or possibly even 90s, trying to sort it out, and being ignored. Why is this not translating from showing up on a computer? I've seen these on the computer system. I've got assisted collection at number 3, 4 and 5 Riverview Place. I have not been getting it for the last 5 weeks. It's a simple question. Why have I not been getting it? No one's got the courtesy to answer.
Sorry, just from an operational perspective, the assisted collections do appear on the devices which the crews are using to guide them around. So, without going into specifics, I mean, we do. The crews are trained on assisted collections. We have had an extra resource who's been down with this for some months now, trying to signpost these as clearly as he can, and some of the what he calls crib sheets that he's been supplying are very accurate, almost unerringly so. But certainly, as these come about and as we are made aware of them, again, I would have to check, but we should be dealing with them. We absolutely should. And the assisted collections, I 100% agree with you. They are the particular members of the population that we shouldn't be letting down. And I can only apologise if we are, and I will take that away as a very specific action to find out what it is that we are telling our crews about the way that the assisted collections are highlighted to them, which I know they are, and what it is we're doing them when they are not actioned.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Snowden.
The thing that sort of really concerns me, sadly, is the over-reliance on technology. And as several other members have said, this is a very rural area. There's loads and loads, I drove here across Dartmoor. There's loads of places where the radio reception drops out. And there's, there's loads of places where there's no internet signal, etc. So from what you said earlier, in order to really get these, particularly these narrow access rounds, which are more pertinent to my ward, what they need to actually do it properly once, once or twice, so that it's recorded down, and then they know exactly where they've got to go. So if we try to bring something positive out of it, this is what we need to try and work towards. And I think that members on the ground need to be involved in that.
Just to very quickly clarify, I mean, there is an issue with signal down here. This is the only contract in the whole of FCC which are currently on EE rather than Vodafone, because the EE's reception is better than either Vodafone or O2. But the rounds are downloaded to the device, so even if they do drop out of signal, that information is still available to the crews. They can still record their exceptions, we couldn't get into this or whatever, and that will then download when it then does receive a connection. So it should, and as confident as I can be, it is all still happening, and we are still getting that information. So there is a reliance on technology. I totally agree with you. I go back to when it was maps and pieces of paper, but but as I say, it is there, and the systems are in place, and they do work. And as I say, that information is recorded and is downloaded when there is a signal available.
Yeah, sorry, I have to disagree with the notion that we shouldn't be relying on technology, but then I would say that given my background, I suppose. But and I want to go on to that because when the rounds changes were first introduced, there were an awful lot of problems with the in-cab technology, so-called. I mean, as far as I understand it, it's an iPad, basically, isn't it? And it didn't work, and I'd like to understand, largely because I think there's a need to understand these things as to why they happened, to build confidence for the future. So how on earth was it that when the rollout began, this is just the round changes, not the rollout of the new recycling system, they had all sorts of problems, and I spoke to crew on several occasions where they'd got themselves into difficulties, and they were complaining about the software. It was out of date, they hadn't had any training, and they just didn't know what they were doing, basically. How did that situation arise? And what are you doing to make sure it never happens again?
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Councillor McCarthy. I agree. I mean, there shouldn't be an over-reliance on technology, but technology should support these type of contracts going forward. And essentially, you are right. The crews will have a tablet, iPad, or equivalent, and the software that you guys as a council, and it's a business application that we use across all our collection contracts, as do a lot of our competitors, is a sector-specific collections and business application that enables round progress to be monitored and routes to be managed. So the issue sometimes with in-cab and the technology issues that were part of the round change, we understand we got over. There was some update issues, there was some there was some duplication of data with when the CRM system links to the council system in terms of that data input. That's all been cleansed and sorted. So as always with technology, there are glitches that have been ironed out. The other thing, what I would say, I mean, once the service is working as it should, and crews, of which we've got many more at the minute, get used to it, it is a real beneficial tool from a management perspective. But what you do find with some crews is, and it varies dependent on the driver, or the fear of technology and their acceptance of the use of it can be variable initially, and that needs to improve over time. So where that is the case, we need to identify that and make that better.
Can I just come back? So, I mean, I've been involved with IT all my working life and rolled out lots of very complex systems, and you go through a testing process. I still don't accept your explanation as to how come a complex thing like a round change was rolled out without properly testing the software that was supporting it.
Sorry, can I just... I mean, the software that we use on, well, certainly all of my other contracts, and we have done reroutes there. The problems that we incurred during the initial reroute was a software update. Excuse me, a software issue with the supplier, and as soon as that was identified, a process was put in place to correct it, but that process, for one reason or another, from their perspective, took a couple of weeks. So that was around very much, as Mark put it, the duplication, and again, unfortunately, a lot of that information that was corrupted was the assisted collections at that time, which, as I say, it took them some time to resolve it. But as far as the actual software is concerned, it is almost rewritten for each contract, but it is a system that we use very, very successfully elsewhere. And the comment was made earlier, we're not victimising South Hams, but it has worked elsewhere, and there was no reason to suppose that it wouldn't happen, it wouldn't work here as well.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, took a minute there. Yeah, I've got 4 questions, if I may. Can you honestly assure councillors here today that you have a full database of all the properties that South Hams District Council has an obligation to collect domestic waste from? Has anyone actually checked this? Our records as ward members indicate that this might not be the case. Question 2. Would you accept that if we return to the previous rounds, which were tried and tested over a number of years, that we might be able to enable South Hams officers to be able to support issues when they come up and understand where you might next be on the round? And this might actually help the waste team move much more smoothly between South Hams and yourselves. 3, regarding the 2018 data levels that you've quoted, in particular with regard to cardboard and bottles, you're operating across this country. Surely your data from all those other places would have indicated a severe rise in cardboard and bottles. In fact, even if you'd asked the local supermarket, they'd have told you that. So, I mean, I really don't buy that argument. To go back on 3-year-old data and use that as why there's a problem is, I think it's a big stretch to ask us to accept that. And the 4th question is, some of the people that I've been dealing with haven't had their food waste collected for over 8 weeks. And I just wonder what we say to them when the rats turn up, because that's what's going to be next, and it's really unacceptable. So that's my 4 questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hodson. In terms of I think the first question was regards to property numbers. The property or the rounds that we deliver for your residents are based on the LLPG data as provided by yourselves as an authority. Clearly, with that data, there's an element of holiday lets and commercial properties that need to be stripped out of that. So, but in terms of the data and the properties, yes, we have that information. And as you know, some of the access to some of those properties and is as in all contracts, a bit bit nuanced. In terms of reverting to previous rounds, the round changes we've done with the system change that's come in place with the Devon aligned recycling service or the supersized recycling service, the frequency going to weekly, and it physically for the crews it's a much harder collection service because of the multi-compartment element of the service. So from a collections point of view, it's a really hard thing to do. So the productivities in terms of, and when I talk about productivities, that's the number of properties you can pass in any day sensibly. That makes it's harder, so you couldn't go back to those previous rounds sort of from last summer or before. The volume and tonnage point is a start point. I understand what you're saying, but the impact societally in terms of from last year onwards has had a huge impact on a system which is really sensitive, and I'll leave that there for now. And back to the final point you made, I think, on food waste, you know, what we are seeking to address and identify is those repeat misses. So where you have repeat misses, you know, repeat misses aren't an acceptable level of performance by 2 or 3 weeks, but 8 weeks is equally not a problem. So where we are aware that there are those repeats, we have, as part of that previous plan put in May, looked to address those issues with some clear down rounds. And unfortunately, there are individual properties out there in your district that haven't had a collection for a number of weeks, which, where we know about it, we will absolutely do something about it to address it. Brian, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything to any of those points. No?
I will, so just to add, I will have a look at the food waste, and I know that we have, I will have a look at the food waste and see if there's anything we can do with the properties that have been missed for, you know, a considerable amount of time. Even if it is, we just, I'll obviously have to talk to the officers about this. Even if we can just get around there and pick up some of the food waste, because the problem is we can't send in a Devon aligned service vehicle. That's the problem. But we may be able to get around there and pick up the food waste, which will then prompt, well, why can't you pick up everything else? But that's that's part of a discussion that's ongoing at the moment. But I will have a look at the food waste issue.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Barnfield, going back to your comment, which has been picked up by other councillors, of bear with us, we will get there. I think many residents out there will find that very hard to bear with, considering that I know of properties that are now 8 weeks, heading on 9 weeks, and have been reported in continuously, and nothing has taken place. And they're not individual properties, some are groups of properties out there. So I really do think we need to clearly have a good understanding of when you are going to clear those long-standing, outstanding collections, because they are of the greatest distress. And can I also say that I back up everything that's been said about assisted collections. It is disgusting that they are not being supported. Many elderly, physically disabled people who are out there who dearly want to recycle, have been recycling, are in considerable distress. And I'd like sort of a far greater assurance that assisted collections are high priority, along with those long-standing, outstanding collections. Can you sort of give a better answer than bear with us, we will get there? And I think that's clearly got to be a priority, and that is a question. The other element that I really do need to raise, and it was touched on by sort of many councillors, Councillor Smearton as well, there are many people within the rounds who do not have recycling containers because they were not dropped off. I know of cases where the crews who were dropping out had the list of properties. In rural areas, you need a map because they had no clue. Farmers were telling them where they needed to go to drop them off. There are properties out there now who are following the instructions, who are saying, right, okay, I'm continuing to put my recycling into blue and clear sacks ready for the new containers. Those blue and clear sacks are not being collected, or they're being reported in and they're being picked up. When are those people going to be bought online so that they can be cleared at the same time as everybody else? It's very difficult when you've got a road and properties where half of them are being collected, there are blue and clear sacks sitting out there. And the question about rats, I think I've seen more rats around since this has started than I have ever seen. And we all know there are rats around anyway, but they're becoming more and more visible with this. So if you can answer that. The other question that I've got, which hasn't been raised, is how much of an impact is this situation having on the staff out there? Because I think councillors know that quite rightly residents are distraught, very vocal, I won't say aggressive, they are concerned and they really want to put their points across. And I know FCC staff have had comments from people, they have had, they're under stress as well. And what sort of management support are those staff being given? Because they are working under very difficult conditions, under difficult circumstances. We've heard and seen about the problems that are out there with the IT elements that are part of the operation. The other thing is, are you able to get the staff required to operate the system going forward? Because we're hearing a lot of problems out there about recruiting staff generally. And another question, you seem to be using a lot of agency staff, and obviously that has got to be unsustainable for any business. And are you moving ahead to actually bring in full-time staff who will get to know the area and understand the area and understand the problems? Mr. Chairman, thank you. A lot of other questions, but a lot of other members as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Long. I'll start and then I think I'll bring Brian to some of those questions towards the end. I think the first point I noted there, Councillor, was the bear with us comment. Look, accepting that's not an acceptable answer to a resident that's not had many weeks miscollections. One of the things we have been doing and have done as a result of the plan was try and identify those properties because of their restricted nature that have not had a collection for many weeks and put some dedicated sort of clear down rounds on those. So that resource was deployed, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, from the beginning of last week. So we welcome to understand where those still exist because we believe we know where they are and we're addressing them.
Sorry, just to add, I mean, obviously, we have identified those properties, but I wouldn't like to sit here and promise that they've been done because obviously it's the quantity of them and the location. So, but that they are being identified as quickly as we can.
Okay. I support your view that assisted collection should be a high priority. I think Brian mentioned in answer to an earlier question that where there are anomalies there, we will look at those. But yeah, we totally agree, causing the greatest distress. I'll let Brian talk about the containers. The impact on the staff, we understand that this, I mean, it's not, Brian feels it, I feel it, the local management team, supervision team, and the guys delivering on the ground feel it as well. It's a situation that will get better, and in terms of additional support, that we are looking to bolster the supervision. We are looking to ensure that the resource is right. With this type of work, it is tough as well, particularly on a new service, and that will get better over time. But yeah, we recognise that it's a tough situation for everybody, ourselves included. I'm not saying that to get any sympathy at all, but we know, we feel it as well, and we're doing everything we possibly can to rectify that. On the container drop-off and the staffing issues and the agency staff, I'll let Brian pick that up.
I'm glad you didn't ask specifically. I'm sure you wouldn't get too much. The point around not receiving boxes, yes, totally agree that I know that there are boxes. I think we've got, and again, please don't write this down. I think there's something like 800 bins still outstanding to be delivered, and 400 or 500 boxes, which we are trying to get delivered. I'll sort of answer the next question with this one. Is the problem is that we are having difficulty even getting people with ordinary driver's licences to come in and deliver those boxes. So, those people are all being diverted to the vans following the cardboard rounds, etc. So, we are trying to prioritise the service, but obviously, we can't prioritise everything at the same time. Just on that subject, I have just literally, probably in the last 2 or 3 hours, been speaking to a bin delivery company that we have used elsewhere in the country. And as of Monday, he will be on the contract for 4 weeks, and that is all he will be doing. He won't get involved in any of the other operational issues. He will just be trying to catch up on the outstanding deliveries. Impact on staff, absolutely. I can't imagine how stressful this is for the guys out there. We do have sort of systems in place for assistance for the guys if they do and girls if they do start to feel under stress. We are bringing in a new contract manager as of Monday, who will obviously assist, and obviously that all of that is made available to both agency and our own staff. The question is, can we get the staff? The simple answer to that at the moment is no. We have more vehicles that we could send out, sat down at the depot, but we can't get the drivers and even the loaders at the moment. This is not a South Hams issue. This is a national issue at the moment. I've literally, Mark and I have been on with another client only today about the same sort of problems. So it is a concern. It is something that we are looking to address. We are offering people the chance to train up as drivers, because that is predominantly where the shortage is, but not only. And in answer to the agency staff issue, as I say, I've been around for a bit. We don't get walk-ins anymore. We don't get people who sort of knock on the door and give us a job. We don't advertise in the papers because we don't get that much response from those. The easiest and the most efficient way for us to recruit people is to recruit people through agencies, because people who are looking for a job tend to go for an agency because they will get the type of work that we are looking to fill. All of the staff that we have got there at the moment are on a temp to perm basis. So although we say we have a high proportion of agency staff, it is not the intention at all that they will remain agency staff. Once they reach their 12 weeks, which we will pay them through the agency, we get them on what is Bosman, essentially a free transfer. So that is the way that we are recruiting, and I'll be honest, that is the way the industry recruits pretty much across the country at the moment. We do have adverts on Indeed, we do have adverts on Web Recruit and some of the other sort of outlets or inlets, whichever way you look at it, for positions. We simply we don't get the applicants that way. They come through agencies, and unfortunately that's a state of the world today. That is the way we get people in. So they are agency, but they will soon become permanent employees.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for letting me speak. I know that executive members don't usually speak at ONS meetings, and I think that the point Councillor Austin was trying to make was, had this been a full council meeting, all members would have been part of any decisions made today, and not just ONS members. So on that basis, I would like to ask some questions, and I thank you. As an executive, we have had weekly meetings with FCC over the past 3 weeks. And as Councillor Spencer said, we were given an action plan, which actually failed before it started. I've listened for over an hour and a half to questions, all of which are relevant and all of which have been asked by the Executive Director of FCC before. How do we get from a point of questions and answers to a plan to move forward to resolve the situation for residents of the South Hams? It's my first question.
Can I answer that? Because that follows the ending of the questions and answers on the position that we now find ourselves in. I will, once we have finished dealing with the questions and answers on the position we find ourselves, I will be inviting FCC to put forward their proposals for getting us for moving forward and hopefully recovering the position as far as Southampton is concerned. So I can answer that question. So your next question.
Thank you, Chairman. When will you, FCC, have caught up or put in place a plan to collect all outstanding collections from residents? Because I think one of the problems is those residents, as has been said, that have been left for weeks on end. And I think we need a clear date by which you can guarantee that all these missed collections are actually collected. So I would like some sort of time frame put in to tell us if people have not had a collection for, say, 2 weeks. When are you going to catch up with that? Because to wait several weeks is completely unacceptable. I think to wait a week is unacceptable, but I would say if someone has had to wait 2 weeks or more and their collection has been missed, can we have a time frame in when you can expect to have caught up with all those, please? I'd like some sort of absolute end point.
Councillor Hopwood, again, can I say that falls into the next section, and hopefully there will be an answer to your question that will emerge in the next session after we've dealt with the current question and answers, so I can answer that. So have you got another question?
Yes, thank you. When will FCC make a public statement to the residents of the South Hams, ensuring them and South Hams Council that they have new plans? And when will these be implemented? And can I ask when and what timescale you can give to guarantee that a difference will be made to the waste collections that our residents are experiencing at the moment? And I know what you're going to say, Chairman. You can answer this because you're going to have a plan, so that's fine. And it's, again, I think it's credible. I've sat at the back and listened to all these questions, Chairman, and I thank you and the members who have spoken, because I think we are all speaking with a credible tone today. And I think the tone of the meeting is credible to all of us as members, because how we are speaking doesn't resemble what we're having to deal with behind the scenes. So I absolutely pat us all on the back and say, well done, members, because we are having to deal, and our officers, of course, but we are having to deal with such troubles behind the scenes that I think the tone of the meeting is superb. So that's all I want to say. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hopwood. Councillor Holway, you have a question.
Oh, please. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I had a call this morning from a lady, and it really summed up the situation again. She had her containers 6 weeks ago, and she hasn't seen anyone to collect recycling since. So I think I've got umpteen questions, but for now, what I would ask is, do you still have the same route instructions that people used when they took the containers out? And do you have the same vehicles? And if you do, can you please send those out to the people who've had no collection for the last 6? I mean, I have to say, in my patch, I've only one at the moment who's told me there's 8 weeks without a collection, but I've umpteen at 6, and even more at 4, And, you know, we've got to be picking up. And I really think, you know, we need to get back to this 2 or 3 days late. You cannot have food out there stinking. Some of it, obviously, if our frequency is every week, then on the day it's to be collected, it's been there 7 days, and to expect it to be there much more than that in the hot summer is not on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, I think, thank you, Councillor Holway. I think that the question was with regards to the same route instructions and vehicles. Brian, I'm not sure whether you wanted to, you know, I think just before that, with regards to the frequency, and we agreed that that's not acceptable. We know where those properties are, we think, and we're looking to address those with specific resource, and there's supplemental recovery to be done with the plan moving forward. But I think, Councillor Holway, I think there was a question around same route instructions and vehicles, which I'll pass to Brian, if that's okay.
The answer is obviously the routes that were given to the delivery vehicles were the routes that have been created for the rounds. So yes, we do still have that. As far as the sending out the same vehicles, that is not, well, at this point that is not feasible, because the 6 vehicles that we had delivering the boxes are the same 6 vehicles that we've currently got out supporting the cardboard rounds. So I could get in more vehicles. I would more than happily get in more vehicles, but it's finding the people to drive those to get out. So I think the problem will be resolved. Well, obviously the new proposal, if the new proposal is accepted, the problem will get resolved very quickly. But obviously that's a matter for.
Well, I've just got 2 more speakers, and I wonder whether these could be the final 2 plus speakers. Sorry, members who wish to ask questions can remind that there should be questions, and then we'll move on to the next part. So, unless there is a member who's got desperate need to ask further questions. Sorry, I keep forgetting to put this on. So, Councillor Brazil.
Thank you, Chairman. And first of all, thank you so much for organising this meeting. It's exactly what the public wants, and we're doing what the public expect. My first question is, how many properties do you deal with in West Devon, and how many vehicles do you have to deal with them? And that's recycling vehicles. My second question is, at what stage during the phase-out did you realise that you had reached maximum capacity and would not be able to deliver the extra houses? My third question, I think Jackie's already made that, and it's more of a statement. The idea that the South Hams is the one and only place in the whole country that has had an increase in recycling seems a pretty thin excuse. And my last question is, we've been told, as you're trying to create a backlog, that all the sorted recycling is being thrown into the same truck, and then that is taken to Chelston Meadow, where it is being separated by Viridor. Can we please see that contract from Viridor? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brazil. In terms of the specifics of the first question, West Devon, the property count in West Devon is, I think it's between 26 and 27,000 properties. Off the top of my head, the resource deployed there, I don't know if Brian can help me out there. I mean, clearly it's less than South Hams, there's less properties, but if we can confirm that, if you allow us to take that away, we can confirm that.
Because of the nuances of the round and sort of different days, I would rather, if we could come back with a more detailed response to that, because there will be different resources on different days. But I'm quite happy to respond to that separately.
Can you let us start the response that we surveyed?
Yeah.
Of course. With regards to the question on when did we realise that the capacity was being maximised, I assume you're probably referring to my earlier comments with regards to the volumes driving the tips and the transfer station. we were aware mid to end of May that there was significant traffic and tipping congestion at the transfer station, so we put additional traffic flow measures in to ensure that those that needed to go out quickly, the smaller vehicles, got priority over others. So that was put in place. What was driving that? It was becoming clear that it was volumes at that time. So I'd say mid to end of May is when we realised that was happening. And following the tonnage data that we got for the end of May at the beginning of this week from all the reprocessors, when you look at the analysis, that reaffirmed the point that we were seeing with our own eyes at the transfer station. I've got the third question, forgive me, Councillor Brazil, was your point was that you're not the only authority to experience an increase in volumes. No, I think it's fair to say that a large number of authorities, well, pretty much every authority across the UK has experienced a significant increase in volumes in the past 18 months with more people at home. So what was going in commercial streams is now going in domestic streams. So I think it is experienced elsewhere. The pressures on the systems elsewhere will depend on the system that each authority has in place, whether it's a sensitive, the most sensitive system in terms of the curbside sort, fully commingled, will be able to absorb more in terms of system stress, but it's not unique to South Hams at that point, I can assure you. And I think that the point around Viridor going to Chelveston and throwing in a mixed, Brian, we do, for some of the properties where we're clearing down, there is an arrangement with Viridor to separate the recycling further, but Brian, I don't know whether you want to come in there and just elaborate further on what Councillor Brazil's asking there.
Yeah, at the moment that is because it is a short term. We haven't sort of finalised a contract as such. It is very much on an ad hoc basis. But again, we can certainly get the detail of that and circulate it on how they will process it and what materials they will recycle.
Thank you. I live in an urban area where collections are easier to make, but some residents are suffering missed collections as they are being told the point of collection is changed, i.e. away from the edge of their property to some other arbitrary point. Why is this happening?
Thank you, Councillor Birch. Brian, would you be able to pick that one up in terms of the point of change?
Yeah, without knowing the specifics, there are several properties where it's not suitable for our vehicles to go down them. There are many, as I'm sure you know in the area, private driveways and unmade roads that we got away with. We would have got away with sending an RCV because they're a much more robust vehicle. The recycling vehicles are much less robust, shall I say, and they really do have to stick to the highways. So that is what we are trying to do, is get some residents where, maybe we used to collect it from outside their house down a private road which is not made up to highway standard. We need them to bring it out to the highway, but again, if you can give me specifics sort of outside of the meeting, I can get the exact detail for you.
Okay, I think we've got as far as we can with questions and answers. I don't think there's any member got. Sorry, if you can put this on. Right, okay. Sorry about that. Before we move on before I invite FCC to put forward their proposals for, we can call it loosely, the recovery plan, before I do that, I'd just like to answer the question that was put earlier in the session by Councillor Austin, and which provides a background as to why we're sitting here. One of the remits of overview and scrutiny is to, and it states this quite clearly in the Constitution, is to address and deal with the public concerns. And this is in no doubt a public concern. The council held a full council meeting on the 20th of May. And prior to that meeting, I put in a request that the problem that is before us be dealt with by way of an urgent item. Unfortunately, that request was turned down. So I, along with 5 other councillors, felt that the only way forward was for an extraordinary meeting of the council to be held. And in fact, that request for an extraordinary council meeting to be held was lodged before the meeting of the 20th of May 2021. The response to that request, unfortunately, was that we were not offered, but we were informed that there was to be a full council meeting, an extraordinary full council meeting on the 17th of June. And I, along with the other members who asked for what is effectively an urgent meeting, were extremely disappointed with the response. And also others, people outside of this council, were disappointed that the earliest that a meeting could be held would be the 17th of June. So in that position, I, using my powers as chair of Overview and Scrutiny, called for an extraordinary meeting of this panel because it's clearly within the remit to address public concerns. In making that request, I asked for the meeting to be held on the 3rd of June. I was informed that that was not possible, but it would be possible to hold the meeting today. So it was fixed for today. It could have, in my view, it could have been held earlier, but that's just a matter of opinion. So the reason we're here today is to address the concerns that have been raised by the public. Now, the way that this panel is dealing with this issue is in a format that would be completely different if it was before full council. I think the mechanisms for dealing with issues at full council is completely different than the way that this panel will deal with it. Therefore, that I'm giving you the reasons why we're here today. Now, the fact of the matter is, depending on the outcome of this meeting, it may well be that the meeting next Thursday may not be necessary, but that's for others to decide, not myself. You mentioned the fact that there is no proposal currently before members. You may recall that just before this meeting, I informed members that once we had completed the Q&A session that we've just had and listened to the proposals that are about to be put forward by FCC, there would be an adjournment of this meeting to allow officers, meeting with myself and the Vice Chairman, to come forward with a proposal to be debated. The fact of the matter is, I understand that FCC will be putting forward a proposal, and this proposal was only submitted to the officers yesterday. I've not seen the proposal. It is only possible to come forward with a proposal from this panel once we've heard, or once we've not only dealt with the questions and answers that we've just had, but also hearing the proposals coming forward from FCC that members may wish to question and comment on. So that is the reason there is nothing before you. I believe this is the proper way to deal with this matter. This is the format of this meeting, and the approach to this meeting has been agreed with officers, and the officers have agreed with me that the format and the procedure for dealing with this issue is the way forward as far as the panel is concerned. So I hope that answers your question. So I will now ask FCC to put forward their proposals for remedying the position that we now find ourselves in. Mr. Barnfield.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. I think we've explained what we've done so far. where we've got to in terms of the pressures on the system, for a want of a better description, in terms of the volume pressures triggering essentially the maxing out of the transfer station, driven by volumes. What is fundamentally important for us to be able to say to you as members and to your residents is that all residents will get their recycling collection on their scheduled day moving forward. And where there are issues that need rectification, there needs to be resource sufficient to be able to deal with that. In order to get to that place, I do apologise, there's a hair that's in my face and has been most of the meeting. In order to get to that place, the additional capacity needs to be created at the transfer station, and we have plans in place to create that space and that capacity to enable further volumes to move forward. So that's the longer term. In order to get the service working for your residents, and as evidenced by the graph that was put up by the officers earlier, it was evident and is evident that the first 3 phases of the Devon Aligned service, the super recycling service, were working to expected levels, and on the larger recycling vehicles, the Rome equipped, so getting decent volume and going back. So it's our suggestion that we, for the phases that have been introduced since that point, which have essentially increased the level of incomplete properties and misses, that the behind the scenes, the way the material is collected, in order to relieve pressure on that system moving forward, we essentially collect the boxes as presented and bags presented by the residents, but in a commingled fashion, and deal with that recycling, which will go to recycling in a different manner for a period of time until we have sorted the infrastructure problems at the transfer station. The only caveat on the number of properties there affected would be those latter phases for some of the narrow access rounds. That would require food waste for that period of time to go in the grey bin. The remainder of the phases that have been rolled out initially that were successful, and the twin stream rounds that are to continue until that pressure can be alleviated. The detail of that plan, there was discussion on Tuesday's executive meeting with regards to the progress made so far on the initial plans, which wasn't having the material success that we needed. So this was something that was mentioned at that point. The detailed plan was provided to officers yesterday, as I think Councillor Birch has alluded to. So I believe there's a certain amount of rigorous challenge coming from the officers to ensure that they're satisfied with the detail of that. But what I would say with regards to that headline approach is the type of vehicles collecting that material would ensure the rounds are delivered. You would free up a number of the number of smaller vehicles that are contributed to the congestion at the transfer station and enabling us to continue to tip. The resource that would be delivering that would be more resource than actually at the point in time where it was successful to ensure that the residents did get that collection. So we would be bolstering up that resource for those properties that are having to essentially have their system adjusted. And it would also free up resource to enable us to respond and react to where there is a miss. Because of the stretched resource levels at the moment, because of the number out at the minute, our ability to respond and react and recover in a timely fashion at the moment doesn't exist in a way that we would like. So the benefits are that every resident should and would get their recycling collection on their scheduled day, and in a situation where that didn't happen, we would have the resource to be able to rectify as we would expect on a contract of this nature. But the detail behind that, as I say, has only recently been shared with the officers, so that's the headline point.
Can I just make sure this is clear for members? Phase 1, 2 and 3, which started off, well, I wouldn't say according to plan, but it started off reasonably smoothly.
That's correct.
So what will happen with those? What will be the position as far as phases 1, 2 and 3?
They will continue on the new service as rolled out, so that the curbside sort the Devon Line service.
Yes. So what about phases, can you just make it clear then, phases 5, 6 and 7, which are causing all the problem?
Yeah.
What is going to happen? Can you just clarify, make it clear as to what is happening with those 3 rounds, those 3 phases?
Sorry, those phases would be, the residents would present the material, apart from food waste, as they do now, and that material will be put in a single compaction recycling collection vehicle and taken to a recycling sorting facility to separate that material out.
And so, in respect to those phases 5, 6 and 7, the waste will go into the grey bin rather than into the cabin?
No, it will be presented in the containers so that the residents won't be impacted in the way the material is presented, but that material will be put in a single compaction vehicle, right, which is more productive in terms of how far you can go. The food waste would have to go in the grey bin.
The food waste?
Yeah.
What about phase 4, which has not yet been rolled out? What's going to happen about phase 4?
That will, the proposal, and obviously this is a proposal to the officers and yourselves, that would continue to be collected with the 2-sack system until that capacity has been created to receive the material.
And when will that be? When do you...
Yeah,
The question is, when do you, as a company, anticipate having the system running so that you comply with all your obligations under the contract?
So,
I'll just have to answer this question then, Mr. Molyneux.
Absolutely. We've discussed this. So, just to give some context of what we need to do in order to get that, and I will answer your question. There's an element of the smaller vehicles, the 7.5-ton vehicles, and we didn't go into the detail of this earlier. Some of the ones which we've hired in off the commercial market, because the ones with the Turbergs we've bought, for want of a better description, are more efficient in collecting, so we need to order more. So there's vehicle lead times. Our plan, subject to commercial negotiations, is to free up space at the depot by moving the vehicles to another piece of land in order that we can then create some more transfer capacity at the depot. So vehicle lead times, securing additional land and putting some additional infrastructure in place. We have suggested in the plan to the officers would be approximately 6 months.
6 months?
Yeah.
Mr. Molyneux.
Thank you, Chair. So we've got 6 pages of detail here that we've received from FCC at, I'll say yesterday, it was 10 to midnight when we got the final version. The first we'd heard about this approach was a verbal proposition to the executive on Tuesday evening. So you will appreciate that there's a lot of detail to go through to confirm that this will work. If we think about it, this is in effect plan, we've already tried plan A, plan B, plan C, this is probably plan D. We need to ensure as a council that this is 100% successful, and we need to absolutely ensure that the resources are in place, the level of detail is in place to make that happen. It can't be 95% successful. It needs to be 99.99% successful. From my perspective, and I've lost my train of thought now, from my perspective, the way that we've approached sort of plan B and C is a bit like First World War attack on the trenches. It's like we'll send some more troops over to soak up the bullets until they run out of bullets for the machine gun. And this approach is a different approach. So we need to, so whereas previously it was, let's throw more trucks at it, let's throw more men at it, and it still hasn't worked. This approach is changing the fundamental approach to how we manage the different phases, and That's why we need to look at the detail and work out whether this is going to achieve what we need, which is every resident getting a collection every week. And more importantly for me, if we do miss collections, because we will, there'll be vehicle breakdowns, there'll be accidents, that we need to then be able to go and recover that almost as soon as we know it. Because that's part of the other frustration that members have made, is it's not just the fact that it's a missed collection, it's the fact that then we don't know if we'll ever collect it again. And that's the other part of this that's really important. It's one thing saying we'll get out to every resident. We will have hiccups. There will be issues that are beyond the control of either the drivers or FCC. But what we need to do is to ensure that we can then recover quickly and get vehicles back out to those residents. So that's all I'd say at this point.
As has already been said, the first I heard intimation of this was Tuesday evening. I'm not willing to commit at this stage one way or the other. I want a full report from officers on what they think about the scheme. They need time in which to do that. And let's not kid ourselves. Phases 1, 2 and 3 are not perfect. They are still getting missed collections, and we need to get that right as well before we go any further forward. I think I am very concerned about the public image of this, because in effect we are admitting that we have got it wrong. And when we talk about whatever they call it, compatible bill, we're talking about a traditional dust cart going down the road and picking up and throwing the stuff into the back of it, which the residents have carefully segregated. We need to explain to the public that that will be separated out again when it goes to the centre, wherever it is going, and that is a big PR job, and it will need letters going to residents. Chairman, I want a lot more time to think about this. I want time to hear from officers and what they propose. And even though you suggested earlier, Chairman, we didn't need a meeting next week, I would hope we could come back, having given officers the time to look at it, to next week's full council meeting, so that all members of this council, not just members of your panel, can have a say on this and they can vote on it. I don't think I want to take any decision today. I'm too much in the dark, but those are my concerns. And it's the public image side of it, of saying to residents, we got it wrong. Now it's all going in the back of one old dust cart, but it will be separated again at the other end, and also getting over to the public that they need to put their food waste into the grey bin. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Pearce, you wanted to speak.
Yes, please, I do, and thank you for letting me speak, but only to endorse what Councillor Baldry has said, and to let you know that the Executive are absolutely behind him on this one, but it is far too early at this stage to take a decision on the proposals that we, the Executive, haven't seen, and officers have not had time to pore over. We've had a few of the details, but we don't know in any precise detail how this plan is to work. And therefore, I would request that this committee does not make any recommendations, because there are dangers in doing that, and that we give officers the time to bring this back to full council next week, which is the right forum to be deciding something like this in. Thank you, Chair.
I'll open for questions from members of the panel first. This is questions to FCC. Councillor McKay.
Can I ask how this new plan is going to address the backlog? I mean, is that part of the plan? Because I noticed that when we were talking about the backlog, you talked about those streets and areas that you were aware of. I'm a bit concerned that you don't have a comprehensive list of all those places that have had 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks missed deliveries and missed collections. And does your plan incorporate a means of addressing that? Thank you.
If the plan is accepted and implemented, we are confident that all properties will get a collection within that first week. And on some of those, particularly where we are, the properties that have had regular failures will almost certainly, not definitely, but almost certainly be part of the commingled rounds, because they're the ones that are causing us the issue. we will have extra resources for the first week of collections, those just to make sure that we have that extra resource for that first week to pick up the backlog as well as the normal weekly collections. And then obviously we will phase that additional resource out as the rounds become just weekly collections.
Yes, please, if that's okay. What we're also looking to do, Councillor Mackay, is we're looking to bolster our officer team. So, because I think there will be issues. There were already issues on those first 3 rounds anyway. And I've going to have a team of people poring over the data to make sure we have absolutely identified all those properties that have not had collections for 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks, so that we can be confident that we capture pretty much all of them in that week and that we've got that response, and I will be keeping that team in place to then make sure that we don't end up with that scenario that we're in now, which is multiple weeks of missed collections. So it will be, again, additional resources from the council to support FCC if we go forward.
Thank you, Chairman. Notwithstanding the fact that I quite agree with Councillor Pearce, Councillor Baldry and Mr Molyneux about the decision needs to be taken properly and in good time, Mr Barnfield, is it not the case that you've already implemented this plan? Because my rubbish was collected in exactly the manner that you described only this morning. Was entirely tipped into a grabber unit and the food waste was left. Now, if you're telling me that it's going to be sorted, then that's fabulous. But I really think my question to you is, how soon are you going to be able to disseminate information to people to whom that service is already being offered?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thomas. Knowing what I know with regards to the, I don't know whether you were a resident that had a repeated miss, but with regards to there were some properties in terms of clearing down some of the narrow access or restricted properties where we were commingling a certain number of properties to clear the build-up of volume where there have been repeat misses. And I don't know your particular property, obviously, but in that instance it may have been for that reason, and that was, or should have been communicated by way of leaflet by the crews when that happened. That's a potential explanation for that. Has this plan already been put in place? No. What we're proposing is, on the back of the data we analysed on Monday of this week, it was something that we mentioned to the exec on Tuesday, and as the officers have detailed, came across last night. So in answer to your question, no, it hasn't already been agreed, but there was a certain element of the district in order to reduce some of the built-up volume that we did clear in that manner in agreement with your officers.
Can I come back there, Mr Barnfield? Can you, will you be able to guarantee that if this council agrees with your plan, will you be able to guarantee that people are told properly? Because I go back to the point I made to you earlier about the fact we're losing the public. We cannot lose the public. If you're going to ask the public to have their recycling collected in a grabber vehicle, they have got to be told what's happening with it. I think Councillor Brazil was alluding to that earlier with the contract he was talking about.
Sorry, Kate, if I'm able to. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And as part of the proposal that we've put to the officers, there was the communication of that very point and the approach to that. It's obviously something that, should it be agreed, we would need to agree with officers, but there are a couple of 3 strands where that would absolutely be communicated in order that message through a couple of channels was detailed and received.
Councillor Austin.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. So I have 2 questions. I wasn't particularly happy with your answers for my last questions, but I have 2 questions that I'd like to put to you now. Given what we've heard, is it not the case that the Chairman now does agree with the leader of the council that there will be no recommendations come out of this meeting? And secondly, does he not also agree with Councillor Baldry, who is on the executive, that the right and proper way for us to consider this will be at full council next week?
Thank you. There will be a proposal coming out of this meeting, put to this meeting. Whether or not it is accepted by the members of the panel, then that is up to those. So yes, there will be a proposal coming out, but it will not go into any detail as far as what I would call a remedial plan.
What's the proposal?
Councillor Ross, I've answered your question. I'd like to move on to Councillor Hopper. Councillor Brazil.
No, Chairman, I think you've answered Councillor Austin's question. Does Councillor Austin genuinely think it's a coincidence that FCC came forward at 10 minutes to 12 yesterday with a plan? It's because of Councillor Birch, and I thank him once again, that he has forced this council to actually act. It's the leadership of this council that has totally failed to get a grip with this situation and push forward and make them come up with plans which we've asked for. It's only because we're discussing it in public that FCC have come forward with this plan. And quite frankly, I just find it extraordinary that he seems to think that these meetings are unnecessary. It's the main service that we provide to our public. We are failing absolutely to deliver that service. And for some reason, he thinks that we should only discuss it behind closed doors. It needs to be an open and transparent debate so that members of the public and our communities understand exactly what is going on with the shambolic system that is in place at the moment.
Question, Councillor Brazil.
Do you agree with me?
Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to make I was going to make 3, I'm now going to make 4. One, I think if we're going to make some sort of recommendation or proposal out of today, without knowing the detail, which is only known to a few people, it's going to be particularly difficult, but I don't know what the nature of the proposition is going to be. So I think there's some caution there. The second point was every single action that's identified as a result of whatever the proposal details are should have a time frame on it. Residents want to know what's happening, but they want to know when it's going to be sorted out. And so I really strongly suggest that officers, whoever, come up with a time frame for every single action. And I agree with the fact that we are pretty poor at communicating. FCC have been pretty poor at communicating what they're doing. They really should do that, and they should do it in a far better way than has been achieved in the past. And the very last point was, this is not a political issue, and I think anyone who's suggesting that it is should be ashamed of themselves. This is about our residents, and our residents getting action out of whoever it is. And to say it's one political aspect of this council or another is appalling. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just a couple of questions, really. I just wonder if we're still getting the data and the timescales right. I know during the responses that FCC made, they referred to having about 800 boxes that needed delivery. But, I understood it's a matter of thousands of residences that haven't had their boxes delivered. So I just think that, we need to make sure that there's the figures that SHDC has and FCC has do actually collaborate, because we don't want this to be continued as a mess. I don't think 6 months is acceptable. I think we need to have a system that's kind of working in parallel, that is actually working and delivering what we've agreed to residents. We've already slipped over by a month. We've got residents, jumping up and down. It's not just 1 or 2 with who haven't had collections for 8 weeks. It's actually a whole terrace in the middle of Totnes, for example, which is actually accessible on St Catherine's Way. So it's nothing to do other than it's actually just about a data problem. As I say, I don't really have confidence in FCC to be able to deliver, and I don't really want to wait another 6 months to find out that we've still got a problem, and we've really got a serious problem for rats, and people are refusing to pay their council tax already. The other thing I was going to say, which might be a little bit of a help, and following on from what Councillor Smurden said earlier about ward members, I would be more than happy to take my share of the boxes that need for Dartington and Staverton and deliver those boxes to the residents, if that helps part of the problem. And I'm sure other ward members might be willing to help with some of those gaps as well. If it's shared out between all of us as 30 31 councillors, I'm sure that that might be something that we could help with, but that's just a personal offer. But I just think that we've got to be a little bit more imaginative on this, and I think if residents seeing everything getting chucked into one place are just going to think this is a total just hoax about super recycler, it's just, it's just a nonsense.
Your question?
My question is, can we not get this sorted out within a fortnight so that we've actually got something happening, and at least we take in other service providers to actually help do the service, and then while FCC sorts itself out, and this would be at FCC's expense.
Sorry, thank you, Councillor Hodgson. In terms of the question, in terms of alleviating the system pressure, can that be resolved in a fortnight? In short, no, it can't, which is why we've put the plan in place and the detail to deliver the service in the interim and make sure the infrastructure is fit for purpose for many years beyond that period of time needed to sort that out.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you. I'd like to entirely refute what Councillor Brazil has said about the action plan coming on the night before overview and scrutiny, because to my mind it had absolutely nothing to do with the timing of either thing coming through. But I am grateful that FCC has now submitted a detailed plan to our officers, and they will have to sit down and look at it. The question I would like to ask is whether there is a separate plan for getting rid of the backlog quickly and then moving on to the second part of the plan. And will FCC please accept that they need to do something in the communications line and do some recordings or talk to our residents, even if it's only on Facebook and through the council site, but to make it clear that it's FCC talking, it's FCC that has messed up on that. Now, we've been backing you and supporting you for as long as we can, but actually it's about time you came out of the shadows and admitted that most of this has gone wrong, which you have admitted to us today, is your mistake, and that our officers have been supporting you like mad. We, the members, have supported you a long way down the track, but we're getting a bit fed up with it now. And I think a lot of members are more fed up than me, but it's probably their place to be because they may be on the opposition and they can make capital out of it. But actually, this is what we should be thinking about, is our residents. And I know of residents that have been spoken to, not gently at all, when they've pointed out that to the drivers that they haven't had their assisted collection collected. I know of one last week who was told, oh, well, we'll do it this week, but this will be the last time. So it is not a happy situation at all, and there needs to be far better management of your crews from your depots going forward. But my question is, can you separate out for us, please, the elements of clearing the backlog and then moving forward with a better service for everybody from where we are now? And I think the delivery of these boxes is an important aspect of that. And to Councillor Hodgson, I'd say I have already done quite a lot of collecting up in my car and sorting out boxes in my area. And actually, they are quite big and they take up a lot of room in your car. So, and I've got a reasonably large car, but I could only get 12 boxes, 12 sets of boxes in my car.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. In terms of and obviously the details, and the devil's in the detail of the plan, but with regards to the backlog point, which is well made, what I can say contained within that, in terms of the properties that we would be addressing with this adjustment to the system, there will be essentially more resource collecting on RCVs to deal with that than actually was in place before those rounds were introduced. And initially, to deal with the backlog of volumes, there would be supplemental resource on top of that to ensure that your residents got what they needed. And what we do accept, and we have accepted, that the level of service in terms of where that is, it is not an acceptable level. And I've obviously explained during this meeting the reasons why it's got to that place. On the point you also made within in your question was the point of communications to residents, and we totally agree, and the detail of that is also detailed in the plan and to be agreed with your officers and indeed yourself, subject to approval. Brian, in terms of the box delivery point, I don't know whether you wanted to add anything further to what I just said.
Delivering boxes, well, as I say, we've got resources, additional resources we are bringing in at our expense to try and catch up. We will have our own resources and we will treat that as a priority because we can use staff who are not best utilised on the collections. And yes, we will treat that as a priority. As far as the data is concerned, I mean, it was 840 odd bins that I was talking about, not boxes. I know I did quote a number for the boxes, but that's causing us less of an issue at the moment. Although, you know, from the sound of the room, it's more of an issue than I was aware of. And I will go back and find out that data. And, you know, we will try and get those boxes delivered within the next couple of weeks.
Thank you, Chairman. Bearing in mind that we can't really, or I don't feel that you as an ONS can really agree to recommend the contract that needs to be looked over, can I have answers to my questions now, please? Because you did keep saying it will be in the recommendation, So
would you like to repeat your question?
No, because I've closed my laptop and I haven't saved them.
Perhaps, well, in that case, could I suggest you wait until a proposal does come forward, and then you can quite obviously speak to that. Councillor Baston.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to agree with Councillor Spencer that it was a shameful attack by Councillor Baldry, Councillor Brazil on Councillor Baldry, who has been leading the executive on this programme and has worked extremely hard. And if you want a question, Chairman, could I ask you to ask Councillor Baldry to make an apology, Councillor Brazil to make an apology to Councillor Baldry?
No apology necessary, Chairman.
I think that's frivolous. Okay.
No, it's not. Okay. It's not. It's serious. That was an uncalled for attack.
Councillor Hopp, would you put your hand up again? Did you want to speak?
Yeah, I did. I found the leader of our council, which is obviously why she is leader, has written my questions down as I've said them. So I now have my questions. So my questions are, when will the outstanding collections be made, and can we have a date by which these will be done? So if they're more than 2 weeks old, I think I said, could we have some sort of guarantee as to when they will be collected? That's my first question. My second question...
We deal with that first. Could I ask Mr. Baum, are you in a position to... can you please respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor. Councillor Hobwood, thanks for the question. In terms of the outstanding collections, part of what we've put in the plan is a detail to clear that down. We also have, as part of the plan that we put in place some weeks ago, got additional dedicated resource to clear those down. So those properties we are dealing with now. So I'm confident, subject to the acceptance of the proposal once worked through by your officers, that we would be clearing those down in the next couple of weeks.
Chairman, just on that question alone, because I had 4 questions, that's an unsatisfactory answer, because the proposals being put forward by FCC will not be looked at and debated until a week today. So it's unsatisfactory for our residents to be told that actually it's in a proposal as to how we're going to clear the backlog, and although you have in your sentences said that you have started to clear them, clearly there are a lot of residents that still have issues with backlogs that haven't been cleared. So I would like some sort of guarantee, please, that this time next week, when I ask the same question at full council, our officers will be able to stand up and say, FCC have cleared the backlog. It's not a big ask. but it is a really, really important ask.
Mr. Mullen, do you want to respond?
Yes, but I'm nervous now because my response, Councillor Hopwood, would be that residents, based on the plan that I'm looking at, would have another week of misery in effect, in terms of this plan will need additional vehicles that FCC will have to bring in. We need to make sure it's workable. So if it was implemented a week on Monday, that's when we will start collecting every resident. So before that, our FCC will start collecting for every resident. So in the intervening week, I don't see how FCC can make substantial improvements. There have been marginal improvements over the last few days, and we have taken steps with FCC. We spoke to our neighbouring authorities, and I believe we are looking, I'm looking at Brian here from FCC, we are looking to get additional crews in from neighbouring authorities this weekend to try and clear some of those properties. But in terms of cast iron guarantees, I would say in reality we're in the same position that we were in last week, which is we as a group of officers can't guarantee it, and I don't believe FCC will be able to guarantee it, certainly not next week.
Councillor Hobb, have you got any other questions?
I still haven't had a satisfactory answer to that question. I'm sorry, Chairman, but I'm sorry to go on about this, but our residents are the priority of our council. I don't believe it's up to South Hams to give the answer they've just given, and I thank Steve Mullen for the answer he's given, but actually it's not his job to get this backlog cleared, quite frankly. It's not South Hams' job, it's the job of FCC. I listened to what Councillor Hodgson was saying, where she had food waste that is 6 to 8 weeks old, 8 weeks old. I would like to see that food waste collected within the next week, not Monday week, within the next week, because that is a health and safety hazard, and there is no reason why FCC cannot, in my simple life, which I love, get a truck, put a big bin in the back, and chuck all the bin waste, all the food waste in the bin. Don't make it hot. Don't make it complicated. Just get someone to drive a wagon round with one of those big, huge, the massive, great bins, and chuck the food waste in it. 8 weeks is totally unacceptable, and that's the guarantee I want for our residents from FCC.
Mr. Barfield, can you respond, please?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hopwood, and thank you, Mr. Molyneux. We have, and as has been alluded to, there is additional resource in place to recover that situation. Without knowing here and now the individual properties you're referring to, we have worked with officers to understand where those issues are, and we are doing our level best to sort that out in the meantime. There is improvement, and it will continue to improve over the coming days and next week, and subject to approval of the plan, it will get even better moving forward.
Councillor Brazil. So, can I come back to you, Councillor Hopwood? Councillor Brazil.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'd just say that my attack was not on Councillor Baldry. My attack was on the leadership of this council, which includes Councillor Bastone as deputy leader. The failure of this council, we had an extraordinary executive meeting last week in where we were discussing motorhomes policy. Who was the executive member who had to deal with that? Councillor Baldry. Who is the executive member who's having to deal with all of this? Who has faced up? Who's the person who has faced up? Councillor Baldry. Councillor Baldry voted against the outsourcing of this service, and he has been proved right. He manfully is now trying to make it work. It is the proverbial trying to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, and the fact that he's had little or no support in public from other members of the leadership, I think is shameful. Not true. Well, I haven't seen that. My question that I would like to ask, however, is what plans have officers and the leadership of this council put in place if we have to take these services back in-house?
Councillor Brazil, I think that's not within the remit of this meeting. I think that's a discussion maybe for a later date. So I'll come back to Councillor Hotwood.
Thank you, Chairman. And this isn't one of the questions I was going to ask, but I think that's an absolutely appalling statement. No, Chairman, you have just let Councillor Brazil completely chastise the leadership of this council and tell people and let our residents think that we have not worked tirelessly and supported Councillor Baldry throughout this. I am sure Councillor Baldry has his own voice and can say exactly what he thinks, but Councillor Baldry will tell, I'm sure, would tell residents that the members of this executive have not only been completely behind him, but have also asked him if he's happy to carry on with the portfolio. And his answer was completely happy because I want to sort this mess out. So it makes me so cross that when we're dealing with residents, it comes down and it's always from the opposition, politics come into it, and that's sad. So I'll now go on to my second question, Chairman.
I'm sorry, but that's enough. Councillor Baldry.
Yeah. I said in my opening statement, and I'm agreeing with Councillor Hotwood and Councillor Pearce, in my opening statement I said I congratulated the staff, the members and the executive for their hard work. And that is an inclusive statement which indicates that the executive have also been involved in the meetings with FCC on now a weekly basis. But can I just comment on something else that Councillor Brazil said? Because I think I need to clear it up. He mentioned the fact that I voted against the outsourcing of the contract to FCC. I did so, and I did so, I think, for justifiable reasons. But I am nothing if not a Democrat, Chairman. That decision was taken by a full council meeting in the previous council. I would not like it to be implied that because I was against the outsourcing, I have not striven as much as I can to make this work. There is an implication which says I would be glad to see it fail. No such thing. I have worked flat out to make sure that a decision with which I did not agree, but which was democratically agreed upon, I was trying my best to make it work, Chairman. Thank you.
Can I say, I think now is a good time to adjourn the meeting so that I can, and Councillor Smurden, together with the officers, come back with a proposal to put to this meeting. And there will be an opportunity, quite obviously, for members to speak during the debate on that. So the time, I suggest we adjourn until 5 o'clock. Thank you.